must have been 93 because there was something like a Chinese pavilion. Not a real pavilion. It was, in this very remote place nobody would ever go to in the Giardini. And that must have been 93. This thing was a very weird pavilion. I'm talking about the Chinese now. It was sponsored by Armani, I think. So, it was not a official Chinese pavilion. The Chinese had one much earlier, showing some kind of folk art there, like the old man out in the whole Biennale, and then disappeared. And then in 93, this kind of unofficial Armani-sponsored pavilion, shabby pavilion. That is my first encounter with the Biennial. China is, finding its way how to cope with these big international forums. In the past, they just didn't care about contemporary art at all, and they were also not represented, except if there was a special effort by, Armani sponsoring, etc. So only now being forced by outside people like Harald Seemann or maybe like me, they had to take note of contemporary art and have to deal with it. To be an artist in the Biennial, will provide you with the highest status, at least as seen from the outsiders. But still, it's the apex in an artist's life. But that then creates problems for the artist himself, herself, because the Chinese artists tend to be fairly young because contemporary art only exists since the end of the 70s. So many artists then, face the question where to go now. If at the very early stage you are in the Venice Biennial and you get that kind of recognition, where to go from there? I feel at home in two places. One is I'm a passionate Swiss, and one is I'm a passionate Chinese in a way. So in these two spaces, I feel at home. If we trust the statistics, then on the internet, Chinese is the #1 language. But the Chinese writing, the Chinese script, makes it almost inaccessible, to broad circles outside China. I don't think China will be the #1 language. I guess English will be the lingua franca in the world, and I have always watched with some, with a question. So many artists using their English language in their works, even though knowing they don't really know the language. I had a problem for some time with it, but I think it's perfectly okay that they try to communicate in such a way with the world, even though they may not be able to really express themselves, and even though it may lead to misunderstandings, which in the end may be more interesting than the intention they began with. If I think of a nation, I don't have so many positive connotations first. It may or may not help as a metaphor. I think to use the nation, since it's a reality and it's a very important reality, can make sense. And it may be fruitful because of the tension it implies for an art exhibition. So yeah, why not? And hopefully the artists would deal with the problem I am maybe most interested when we talk about nations, coming from my own experience between cultures. This is hard to explain. It's the subtext. It's, say, if I use German, it's das nicht Gesagte, aber Mitgemeinte. What It's not explicit, but we all suppose. And this is where the difference coming from one nation to another, but invisibly, and for most people not consciously, because they may not even be aware of all, you know, this fond, this kind of all this that defines a culture, but we needn't speak about it because we both have the same assumption. But if we talk to another nation, another culture, we may not be aware that these assumptions are not the same. So this is a huge territory, and I think could be mined very interestingly by an artist. I guess paragraph 1, illuminate us. Paragraph 2, don't bore us. That would be enough, I guess, for my taste.